Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something super interesting.
Yeah.
It's all about global trade, but with a specific focus on how it plays out in Muslim-majority countries.
Yeah. It's really fascinating stuff. We often hear about global trade in these big abstract terms,
Hmm.
like these huge numbers and statistics being thrown around.
Right, right. It feels very distant.
Exactly. But it's when we zoom in and see how it affects real communities, real people, that's when things get really interesting. And that's especially true when we look at the Muslim world.
Okay, so let's zoom in then. One of the things that really jumped out at us while we were researching for this was this whole concept of the trade balance.
Yeah.
Basically, how much a country is exporting versus how much it's importing.
Right.
And it seems like that balance, or sometimes imbalance, is kind of a big deal for an economy to be healthy.
Oh, absolutely. A healthy trade balance is crucial. And what we often see, unfortunately, is that many Muslim majority nations end up heavily reliant on imports, which leads to what we call a trade deficit. Basically, they're spending more on goods from other countries than they're earning from selling their own goods.
So that's interesting to me because, like a lot of these nations, they're not exactly short on resources, right? Think about oil, for example.
You've hit a really important point there. That's the paradox, isn't it? You have these countries abundant in natural resources, oil being a prime example,
Yeah.
but they're still heavily dependent on imports, especially when it comes to finished goods.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So we're talking about everything from electronics and cars to even, in some cases, food products. Things they need, things they want, but that are often coming from elsewhere.
So if we're buying all these finished products, what are we sending out to other countries in return? What are we exporting?
Often it boils down to raw materials, and that's where the problem becomes even more clear.
Okay.
We're exporting the basic ingredients, the raw resources, which then get turned into those finished products somewhere else, and then often sold back to us at a much higher price.
Okay, so help me understand this a bit better. Because if we have the money to buy all these imported things, I mean, is it really that big of a deal?
It's a great question. It's really not as simple as it might seem at first glance. Because on the surface, yeah, it looks like a straightforward trade, right? Money for goods. But the issue is, this dependence on imports can actually hold back the growth of local businesses and industries in these countries.
That makes sense. I mean, if everyone's buying imported electronics, it's going to be pretty tough for a new local electronics company to even get started, let alone compete.
Exactly. It creates a kind of cycle. The more we rely on imports, the less incentive there is to invest in building up our own manufacturing, our own industries. And that means fewer jobs are being created locally, and ultimately the local economy, it doesn't reach its full potential.
So it's not just about where the money goes when we buy something. It's about the bigger picture, the long-term effects on the whole economic landscape.
You got it. It's about creating a healthy, sustainable economic ecosystem, right? Now imagine this for a second. What if, just as a thought experiment, Muslim consumers decided to redirect even a small portion of their spending towards locally produced goods and services? Just imagine the impact.
That's a huge shift. We're talking about a massive, massive consumer base here. Almost 2 billion Muslims globally. That's a lot of purchasing power.
And that's where this conversation goes from simply understanding the trade imbalance to recognizing the incredible power and potential that exists within the Muslim consumer base. I mean, even just a small shift, a move towards choosing businesses within our own communities, it could have a huge impact on those trade balances we were just speaking about.
Right.
Because ultimately, it's about bringing that flow of wealth back into our own economies.
So it sounds like we're talking about something even bigger than just economics here, right? This feels like it ties into values too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a question worth asking. Does supporting businesses within our community, businesses that operate ethically and responsibly, does that resonate with Islamic values? What do you think?
It's an important question. What do you think?
Well, it's something that's always been encouraged, right? Supporting our own communities, looking out for one another, especially when we're talking about businesses that are really committed to ethical conduct, to responsibility, to giving back.
So it's not just about where our money is going, but what those spending decisions represent on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about aligning our actions, our economic activity with our values. And there are so many businesses within our communities that operate on those principles: fair trade, ethical sourcing, social responsibility. These are things that are woven into the fabric of how they do business.
So it's about putting our money where our beliefs are, supporting businesses that actually reflect the principles we hold dear.
Exactly. And you know what? It can be incredibly empowering. both for us as consumers and for the businesses being supported. Well, it creates this positive feedback loop, right? Because when we choose to support a business that aligns with our values, we're giving them the power to thrive, to do even more. And that means they can, in turn, give back more to the community, create more jobs, support other ethical suppliers. It's a win-win.
It's like this ripple effect, right? One good decision leading to another.
Exactly.
Now, are there any real-world examples of this in action? Like, are there Muslim-majority countries that have really managed to shift their trade balances in this direction to successfully support their own businesses and economies?
Oh, absolutely. There are some really inspiring success stories out there. Turkey and Malaysia, for example, have done some really interesting things. They've been really strategic about bolstering specific industries, to kind of lessen their dependence on imports and become real players on the global stage.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Mhm.
What are some examples of those successes? Like, how do they actually achieve that kind of shift?
Well, take Turkey's textile industry, for example. They've really invested in their own manufacturing, their own design talent, and it's paid off big time. Turkish textiles are known globally now for their quality and craftsmanship.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then you look at Malaysia, and they decided to really focus on developing their automotive industry. And now they're a major hub for car manufacturing in Southeast Asia.
So it's about identifying those key areas where a country has potential
Yeah.
and then putting the resources and support behind them to help them flourish.
Exactly. And it takes a real combined effort, too. I mean, you need smart government policies, you need investment in infrastructure and technology, and of course, you need a consumer base that's excited about supporting local products and services.
Yeah, I can see how that all fits together. But it also makes me wonder, shifting consumer behavior on a large scale, that feels like a massive undertaking. Like, where do we even start?
I know, it can seem daunting, right? But every big change, it starts with a single step. And in this case, I think that step is about becoming more conscious consumers, more aware of our choices and the impact they have.
Okay, so what does that look like in a practical sense? Give us the action plan.
I think the first thing is simply making a conscious effort to seek out businesses within our communities. And the good news is, it's easier than ever these days. There are so many online platforms and directories that are specifically designed to connect consumers with these businesses.
So it's like instead of just automatically going to, say, one of the big online retailers, we can take a moment to see if there's a business within our community that offers a similar product.
Exactly. You might be surprised at what you find. The quality is often amazing, the variety is incredible, and the prices are often really competitive. It's just about expanding our horizons a little bit, being open to new possibilities.
It's so easy to get stuck in our routines, to not even realize that there are other options out there.
100%. So that's the first step. And then the second thing I think is to spread the word. If you find a fantastic business within your community, shout it from the rooftops. Tell your friends, tell your family, share it on social media.
Word of mouth is powerful.
It really is. Use your platform, whatever it might be, to shine a light on these amazing businesses and encourage others to check them out. And then the final piece of the puzzle, I think, is to think collaboratively. If you know any entrepreneurs, any business owners within your community, encourage them to connect with one another, to share resources, to maybe even explore potential collaborations.
So it sounds like what we're really talking about here is like a whole mindset shift, right? If we want to see a more sustainable and more equitable economic landscape within our community, it can't just be about a few individual purchases here and there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's got to be bigger than that. This has to be a movement, a real movement towards awareness and education. And, sometimes it means being willing to break out of those comfortable patterns we've all developed. Absolutely. It's about understanding the power of our choices, as consumers, and then using that power to support a more just and inclusive system, but within our own communities.
Okay, so for those of us listening right now, what can we actually do? I mean, besides trying to seek out those businesses within our communities, are there other steps we can take to support this kind of movement?
One of the most powerful things we can do is become advocates for this idea. Like, take what we've talked about today and share it.
Spread the word.
Exactly. Talk to your friends, your family, post about it online. Encourage people to think about this stuff because, honestly, the more conversations we have about this, the more awareness we create and the closer we get to seeing real change happen.
Because awareness is power.
100%. And
Yeah.
it's not about telling people what to do, right? It's
Yeah.
about empowering them with knowledge, with options,
Yep.
so they can make informed decisions.
Right, right. And it's empowering, I think, to realize that we all have a role to play in this, even in small ways, you know? Like, we can choose to spend our money in a way that supports businesses that reflect our values. And by doing that, we're contributing to a much bigger picture.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. The more we understand the influence we have as consumers, the more potential there is to create positive change. And not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
So it really comes down to, like, conscious consumerism, right? Being mindful of those everyday choices we make and the impact those choices have. It's bigger than just buying a product. It's about supporting a whole ecosystem.
100%. And it's about recognizing that power of unity too, right? When we
Yeah.
come together, when we consciously support one another within our communities, that's how we build stronger economies, economies that benefit everyone. And not just now, but for generations to come.
It's about investing in a better future for all of us.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we've done some good brainstorming today, and hopefully our listeners are feeling inspired to get out there and make a difference.
Me too. And, even if it's just a small change, every little bit counts. Maybe next time you're thinking about where to buy something, take a second to see if there's a local option. Or look for a brand that prioritizes ethical practices.
Those small choices, they really do add up.
100%. They make a world of difference.
That's a great place to wrap up, I think. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. It's been amazing having you here.
The pleasure was all mine. This was a fantastic conversation.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.